From the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English. Ramping Up Your English is an instructional support program for intermediate level English learners. If you've already passed those beginning stages of learning English, and you want to reach higher levels of English proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs and get you to your goal. Ramping Up Your English is for English learners from all language backgrounds and for people of all ages. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our current thematic unit is Native Americans. This is segment 1 of episode 87. Whew, what a journey it's been. In this unit on Native Americans, we've learned many ways of communicating past events, from the simple past tense, not all that simple with irregular verbs, to past perfect, present perfect, and past progressive tenses, along with modifiers called adverbs to clearly and accurately relate events from the past. Well, a much more awesome journey has been taken by the ancestors of today's Native Americans. We know that some crossed the Beringia land bridge at least 14,000 years ago. That's good evidence that others came later as well, some overland and others by sea following the coastline. Now, many were here early enough to hunt megafauna such as woolly mammoths and mastodons. They populated 2 continents where there's no evidence of human evolution. Now, many settled in places that had never been settled by humans. Now we find that ancient hunter-gatherers built great cities in Louisiana's Mississippi Delta, forming the hubs of extensive trade networks among the tribes that found unique ways of developing the resources where they lived. Now, before we learn more ways of ramping up your English to higher levels, let us learn about the ways that these early Americans evolved as societies.
Early Native Americans survived the climate change that eliminated their first food supply by adapting to those changes. They learned to work copper and develop new weapons for hunting. In Louisiana, a group built massive mounds that still stand today at Watson Brake, and then 2,000 years later, another group at Poverty Point. These cities marked a sea change from living in small bands to organizing great cities, even as they continue their hunter-gatherer tradition. Besides clustering in larger groups, Great public work projects were carried out over generations of time in building and maintaining these first cities. Materials for construction were gathered from great distances through a complex trade network, allowing them to literally rise above the surrounding river delta. Much of what we know about these people were found buried in these mounds. There were millions of artifacts for researchers to study, as they continue to do to this day. Poverty Point is a national monument and a World Heritage Site. Here's a short video about it. At the time of Poverty Point culture, hunting and gathering were still the main way of sustenance, although so many of America's megafauna had disappeared. There was an abundance of wildlife here to take their place and to establish the basis for the religious practices. From the emergence of animals like elk and caribou and their smaller cousins, deer, to the teeming salmon that made their spawning migrations along many rivers and creeks, new meat made its way to the menu. Native Americans were attentive to the way that animals sustained themselves. On the Great Plains, massive herds of buffalo provided food, shelter, and tools. While the change in climate was traumatic, the animals that emerged from it provided a rich variety of fauna, but also demanded that the people adapt. And adapt they did, learning new ways to hunt and coexist with their new animal neighbors. This development allowed them to thrive as hunter-gatherers. We don't know why the next change came, but for some, the hunting and gathering life slowly changed to one of agriculture. In Mesoamerica, complex societies were organizing early cultures like the Olmecs. The early Maya civilization built the sprawling city of Coba, and the dominating city of Teotihuacan would build the massive pyramid of the sun. The Zapotecs built the great city of Monte Alban in Oaxaca, and early Maya constructed the pyramid of the jaguar in Tikal. People were moving to cities in socially stratified cultures. This change first happened in Mesoamerica with the cultivation of corn. Further north, the Hopewell culture provided a cultural bridge between hunting and agricultural economies, all along the eastern Mississippi River Basin and in the southeast. In Newark, Ohio, earthen mounds are still present from the city built by these Native Americans. The Newark earthwork site is the largest surviving Hopewell earthwork complex in North America. The complex covers several square miles and includes an octagon-shaped lunar observatory, tracking the moon's orbit over an 18.6-year cycle. Ohio is the home of the Hopewell Culture National Historical Park, where archaeologists learn about these early people by digging up objects they left behind.
I'm Patrick Zingarella, a archaeological technician here at the Hopewell Culture National Historic Park here in Chillicothe, Ohio. We have made an exciting discovery here on Site 33 RO 338. What we have here is a tetrapodal vessel. This is made out of pottery, ceramic. What we have here is we have 1, 2, 3 legs. Looks like a fourth one may have been here and is missing now. This vessel probably would have been used in more of a ceremonial context and not really used in a daily life. But you can, if the zoom is good enough here, you can kind of see some mica temper in this pottery as well. We also have another piece of pottery right down here. Not really sure if it's from the same vessel or not, but yeah, very, very exciting find.
The Newark site was built between the years 100 and 500 AD. Its earthworks used for ceremonies, social gatherings, trade, worship, and honoring the dead. The Hopewell people contributed a great deal to the development in North America with their artistic legacy, laying the groundwork for the Mississippian culture that would follow. The Eastern Shawnee Nation once settled in this area of Newark. Chief Glenna Wallace expresses her thoughts about preserving such places during a dedication ceremony.
We know that these earthworks were originally places where a great sense of community was fostered, both in their construction and their eventual use as sacred places. But we are just now at the point of awakening, in my opinion, to realize what a treasure you have throughout Ohio, not with just Sipes Mound, but so many others. And oftentimes we don't realize what treasures are until they have passed through our fingers. Thank goodness that this treasure has not slipped through our fingers, and that we are today uniting, and we are today saying, what a treasure we have here in Ohio.
Here we see one of those treasures from the Hopewell Exchange. During the same time, we go back to Louisiana to see the Marksville culture. The sphere of influence covers all of Louisiana, as well as the eastern Gulf Coast. It's one of the largest of this period in the southeast, with ring features not found elsewhere. Burial mounds at the site are surrounded by a horseshoe-shaped earthen embankment about 3,000 feet long. With the ice sheets retreating north, more and more areas north of Mexico became suitable for agriculture. The raising of food crops resulted in more dense and sedentary populations, resulting in great cities like Cahokia. Cahokia was the largest and most influential settlement of the Mississippian culture. Advanced societies ranging from today's central and southeastern regions 1,000 years before European contact. Cahokia Mounds is considered the largest and most complex archaeological site north of Mexico. By some estimates, Cahokia was home to 40,000 people. By this estimate, Cahokia had a larger population at this time than London. Cahokia was settled around 600 AD, but the mound building didn't start until 200 years later. Located where the Missouri and Illinois rivers meet the Mississippi River, Cahokia was the hub of a far-flung trading network from Minnesota to Florida and westward. Copperware and farming tools made of chert
were manufactured here and traded widely with other Mississippian settlements. In this trade, Cahokia thrived. Monk's Mound is the tallest and most central structure at Cahokia of the 80 mounds located here. At 10 stories tall, it was the tallest structure north of Mexico. In this socially stratified society, the supreme leader would have lived at the top. Excavations show that different activities were carried out in different parts of the city. The copper work was centralized in certain locations, while other sections were utilized for tool making and yet others for food preparation. Cahokia is named for the area tribe encountered by French explorers. We don't know what these people called themselves. The game of chunky was widespread among cities of the Mississippian culture, as depicted in this Cahokian figure. This was a culture of pottery making, involving great artistry. This figure is called Birdman and was found throughout the cities of the South, Central, and Southeast. Some mounds were used for burials. Archaeologists found the tomb of a man with apparently very high status, called Birdman. He was buried on the figure of a giant falcon. The Mississippian culture held a place at the top for priests. Some human remains at Cahokia appear to be those of sacrifice victims. From the lofty earthworks, visitors can see the city of St. Louis, with its iconic gateway arch and office buildings. Cahokia was built and inhabited over a period of 800 years. What will still be here of St. Louis in 800 years? These are all scenes from Cahokia Mound State Historic Park. The park welcomes visitors for special events where people can see the excavations and where kids can explore and learn about these early Americans. Cahokia's glory days are far behind it, yet it stands unrivaled as the largest among many highly organized cities of the Mississippian period. Along with structures that dazzle the eye, even in ruins, the Hopewell and Mississippian cultures have left us enduring treasures of artistry. The most western flung of these is the Caddoan culture. Being so far to the west, cities like Spiro seem to have missed the warfare that occurred further east as the Mississippian culture ebbed and larger cities were abandoned. Other people built cultures and left mounds. The Natchez left ceremonial centers that they used beyond the Mississippian era. They also left distinctive pottery. As widespread as the Mississippian culture extended, it's no surprise that their ancient cities are still being discovered. They've left a legacy of what people can achieve when they work together.